tell me just a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a native Mobilian, fourth generation native Mobilian. I'm an attorney, I'm a judge, I'm a husband, I'm a father of three, I have 5 dogs, I'm a downtown Mobile dweller and have been for the last 35 years off and on. I'm a John L. LaFleur High School graduate. I started my collegiate career at Bishop State Community College and graduated from the University of Mobile. My grandfather was a physician here in Mobile, going back to the first pandemic in 1918. My father was a pharmacist. He owned a chain of African American drugstores. My mother was a school teacher, taught history, which was where I get my thirst for historical knowledge. And my sister was the founder of the African American Heritage Trail here in Mobile, which I now serve as its president. And when she passed in 2012, the city named the trail after her. You can see those individuals over my right shoulder on the wall. They were all 3 featured on the AT&T Alabama history calendar of the year for 3 years running. So I can continue on if you like.
So all of these things, accomplishments, different parts of your life, how did that lead you to want to run for mayor?
Well, you know, it was more so the need for leadership in our city that led me to wanting to run for mayor. We need change with vision for the future in our city, and I don't see that currently in the administration that's in office now. You know, over the last year during the pandemic, we had children who were having to go to bus stops and, you know, McDonald's and Starbucks to do their homework because they didn't have Wi-Fi in some of their communities. And broadband was certainly not available in different communities within the city. And so that kind of leadership, looking for the future, looking to the future, ensuring that the next generation has as many opportunities as it possibly can. We've got quite a few problems in our city that are on, you know, the top of the list. One being violent crime, the other being affordable housing, and of course, if we can finally get everyone vaccinated and healthy, we've got an economy we've got to get back on its feet. So as a judge, as a former assistant district attorney here in the city of Mobile, and a Coast Guard veteran, you know, I've been working in law enforcement, you know, for the last 30 years. So I understand that, but I also understand in working, especially in the district attorney's office, that prevention is the key. It's not about catching people and punishing, because let's be clear, we can't arrest and jail our way out of the current situation. There must be a renewal in hope, a renewal of hope in our youth of today, because that's who's creating the majority of the violent crime. We've got 33 homicides so far this year in the city of Mobile. The last time this year, we had 23. Now 23 is too many, but we are certainly not trekking in the right direction. And not only are homicides up, but so are assaults as well as robberies. Those are all direct correlations to a lack of hope within a certain segment of our community. And as a judge, as one who served on many boards of directors of nonprofits, inclusive of Boys and Girls Clubs, Dearborn Street YMCA, I'm now currently a member of the Most Pure Heart of Mary School Board. I understand what many of our children and what our youth are going through, and especially our young adults, because again, you know, as a judge, I do bond hearings. And the bond hearing is the first time that an individual comes before a judge after they've been arrested. And so I'm on the front lines and I see what's going on out there, and I see the hopelessness in so many of our young people's eyes. And I know that there is something that I can do about that. So I'm stepping up so that I can offer myself up as an example of what can be done. Because again, I'm a public school kid. I graduated from John L. LaFleur High School. I grew up in Tolmanville and Crosstown. So my story is many of the peoples who are in those young adulthoods, many of the people who are in those young adulthood years. So my story is not just a story, it's a testimonial. Because if I can do it, and I was in the same place that you were at one time, then you're capable of doing it. The only limitations that you have are the ones that you place upon yourself. And so as mayor, I would be an even greater example of what's capable from the youth and people within our community. Girls, boys, LGBTQ, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you've got the intestinal fortitude and the drive to be all that you can be. I'm living proof of it.
And is everything okay? You gonna turn the light up? Okay. My lips are dry.
After all that rain,
Hair's still dry. Alright. So, let me sit up first and then I'll ask my next question. What are your top 3 priorities if someone is sitting there and they're saying, okay, these 3 things are why I want to vote for Karlos Finley?
we've got to lower the violent crime. We've got to create affordable housing in our community. And we've got to get this economy back running after this pandemic. Those are the 3 top concerns of not me. I learned those things from a poll that we took throughout the city. See, that's the kind of leadership that I bring to the table. It's not about what Karlos Finley wants. It's about what the community needs. I listen to the community. I listen to the people. I am a representative of theirs. It's important that we all understand that the mayor's seat belongs to the people, not to the mayor. You are a representative of the people. You're an advocate for the people of the city of Mobile. So those are the 3 things that this people within the city of Mobile, from the poll that we did, we said violent crime, affordable housing, and getting our economy back on track after this pandemic. Because let's be clear, no matter what we do, if we're seen as a violent city, it doesn't matter how good our economy is, doesn't matter what kind of affordable housing we have. We're looking at a burgeoning tourist industry here in the city of Mobile. Obviously, we're the site of the last slave ship to ever come into the United States. That's a very unique opportunity for our city to be showcased on a level like none other. And we've seen that with the Equal Justice Initiative that's in Montgomery, Alabama. We saw their tourist numbers go up. The Civil Rights Institute in Birmingham, as well as the Civil Rights Trail that travels throughout the state of Alabama. More people visited the EJI Legacy Museum and the Civil Rights Institute in Birmingham from outside of the state of Alabama that went to our beaches. Get a hold of that. More people came from outside of the from outside of the state of Alabama to visit those 2 entities than came to visit our beaches.
Going to crime, what are some things you think need to happen here in the city to reduce that, to make people feel more safe?
Well, thank you so very much for that question, because it's an important one, because we can't police or arrest our way out of this situation. We've been doing that, and it's not working. Number 1, we've got to restore hope in the youth of our city. We've got to have activities for them to engage themselves in and be involved in. We've got nonprofits across this city that are capable of doing that, but they must be adequately funded. The city can be a direct impact upon that, not just with the American Rescue Plan, but also with the rainy day fund that we have. and the wonderful budgets that we now enjoy. Because, this pandemic is a very interesting thing because on one hand, it knocked a lot of people out of their jobs, but on the other hand, for the city of Mobile specifically, our city revenue went up because it's based upon sales tax. And the Costco's and the Sam's of the world, they made a lot of money because people were staying at home and just going to the grocery store and getting what they needed. And so all of those sales tax then became revenue for the city of Mobile. So our city coffers are looking well. In fact, we weren't eligible for as much money as other cities because we were not hit as hard by the pandemic financially. And because partly of our economy as well, because we're a shipping and receiving community. So all of the containers coming in and the containers going out, that was big business for our city. And so we fared well from there, but our small businesses, we've got to get back going. Our education system, we've got to get that back rolling. And our local folk, that's the thing that we've really got to get back going so that those mom and pop shops, those places that we all like to go that we know that are uniquely Mobile, we need to get those places going back again. And of course, one of the things that I'm really been concentrating on and speaking to is the riverfront. I mean, we're a riverfront city, and there's really not very much activity on our riverfront. We've got to diversify that because that could be our front porch, and I'm all about industry, but we need to share a little bit of that riverfront space with, tourism, retail, enjoyment, entertainment. We've got, an amphitheater there on the riverfront, but rarely does it or is it used. And there's some infrastructural things that contribute to that. And one, of course, giant and glaring one is the train. The train that runs parallel to our river can be a real impediment to the enjoyment of that area. So we need to create some infrastructure to take the train out of the picture. And that's possible and capable as well. I've got some ideas towards that.
And having more things for people to do, especially younger kids, do you think that directly attributes to pulling them away from crime, pulling them away from these things that maybe just aren't there and pushing them towards that?
No question, no question. I mean, we've got, we had a pool in Figures Park that was only open one day of the week this year. And that wasn't posted. It's one thing to see the posting saying, sorry, we don't have enough workers, whatever the case may be, we're doing construction, pool's only going to be open on Wednesday. But to have nothing there, so when they don't know when the pool is open, when they come, that's frustrating and it's aggravating. Also, what about a bowling alley? And to me, that's a very simple thing. I mean, a bowling lanes, we've got one, it's way out Highway 90, but we need more things in our traditional areas of the city, our areas that have been, quite frankly, neglected for many, many years, because those are the hot spots. The same places that are food deserts are the same places where the crime is, the violent crime is high. Now, when you talk about crime, and we have to be careful with this because some statistics are down. So your crimes against properties and things of that nature are down. But the crimes of violence are up, and they're up significantly. And so we have to make sure that we're looking at that intelligently. Another, very, very strong contributor is mental health. We've got a huge problem with facilities to care for our mental health, and our system of city government, justice system, it's not geared towards dealing with those who have mental health issues. And so we need to get some systems in place so that we can deal specifically with those instances when the police are called and maybe they're not really needed, or when the blue suit, the shiny badge, and the gun are seen, it escalates the issue. And so we need to have trained mental health care personnel that are able to respond to those scenes. If we do that, though, we've also got to have the backup, which is the facility, to deal with that. Because again, as a municipal court judge who does bond hearings, there is not a bond hearing that I do where there is not a mentally challenged person in that hearing. Oftentimes it's 5 to 10. And so those are things that's unfair for police officers because they're not trained or equipped to deal with those situations. And so it's unfair to put our officers in that position because they're being utilized as a catch-all. And that's not a good thing, and it's certainly not sustainable for our city. So that's a huge area that we've got to look at. And of course, that ties directly to homelessness. Many of our homeless citizens are suffering from mental illness, and we don't have a dedicated homeless services center in the city. We've got homeless facilities where you can pay to stay the night, but if you're homeless, oftentimes you don't have the money, because I understand that they're working homeless, but many, and especially those who suffer from mental illness, don't have money to do that. I served on the board of directors of 15-place homeless services center in our city for about 8 or 9 years. And it was a great facility because it allowed folk who were homeless to have a place to come in and wash their clothes, to take a shower, to get at least one hot meal a day, and most importantly, a telephone number and address. Because if you're homeless and you're trying to get a job, the first thing that an employer is going to ask you is, well, what's your phone number? What's your address? And so that services center allowed those people the opportunity to be able to provide a phone number and an address for potential employees to call. Another thing is that, and all of these things I think that I really need to communicate, there are many that are connected together, and it's not an issue. Because when you start talking about homelessness, you start talking about mental health, now you've got to talk about our veterans. Because many of our homeless, mentally challenged people are veterans because they stood in the gap for all of us. They went over to a godforsaken land, they defended us, they stood up for us, and now they're back home and nobody's standing up for them. So there are many veterans who will not live inside. They can't live inside because what's going on in their minds will not allow them to be closed in. And so I saw a place in another city, they had what was called a pad. And what it did is it allowed those folk who just could not stay inside to have a covered space that they could put a tent under. And they could pop their tent there, they could stay the night, and then the next day they could take a shower, they could wash their clothes, do whatever they needed to do, and go on about their merry way. We've got to start thinking outside of the box like that. That's the vision for the future that I'm talking about. And you put that place nearer to, let's say, a transportation hub so that the folk can move about the city using our public transportation, which is another area that we can sit and talk about, which is our bus services here in the city, which are sorely lacking. I was very proud to attain the endorsement of the Amalgamated Transit Union, which are all of our bus drivers and mechanics and things of that nature, because I gave them a perspective with vision for the future and how their positions could be better. Because listen, you're a bus driver, you're an essential worker. When people who are homeless, who haven't had a shower, come onto your bus, that's very offensive. And in this day of pandemic, you're exposed immediately to people from all over everywhere. And so those bus drivers got the message of how I would help to guide their situation, because let's be clear, the bus drivers are not city employees. The WAVE transit system is a contracted entity with the city of Mobile. But if a mayor says, you're not treating your people right, and the next time the contract comes up, we may be looking for another company, now you've incentivized that company and those leaders to say, hey, we might want to straighten up, we may want to listen to the union more often. I'm a union guy. I worked 10 years in a paper mill while getting my undergraduate degree. I've never been a traditional student where I only went to school. So while I got my undergrad degree, I worked at Kimberly-Clark, Scott Paper Company, a paper mill, working shift work, 11 to 7, 3 to 11, 11 to 3 to 7, every day. And so every week that shift changed. One week I'm on 3 to 11. Next week I'm on 11 to 7. Week after that I'm on 7 to 3. But I worked hard and I put my nose to the grindstone and I got my college degree, and then I matriculated on to law school where I was, again, not a traditional student because I was 36 years old. So I had to take care of myself. So I was very fortunate and blessed to attain a position with a circuit judge, and I worked Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and I went to school from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Passed the bar on the first shot. Again, that's a testimonial for younger people who may say, I don't have a chance to do anything. I can't get out of here. Just because of the way you heard to do things as what you're only exposed to, my story propels a whole nother narrative. Look at what this guy did. He worked his butt off, and now he's the mayor. I can do the same thing from John LaFleur High School.
With the economy and building up these small businesses that we saw really struggle in our community, how can we help them more now that they're starting to come back? But I know from talking to them all the time, it's not there yet.
No, and it's not going to be there until we all get past this pandemic. The sooner we get past this, the quicker we can get back there. That involves following the science, not Facebook. We have to follow scientists and trained medical professionals. And leadership has to promote that. You see, oftentimes you see folk kind of talking this way and maybe kind of talking that way and not being direct about what we need to do. We need to be vaccinated and we need to wear the mask or be socially distanced until we get past this pandemic, period. There's nothing else. When we start entering all these other political things in and rights and human rights into it, those are red herrings. Those are things that are selfish and they're not really considerate of your fellow person. And so that's what leadership does. Leadership says, hey, stop that. Yeah, I know you say that you've got a right to not take a vaccine and you've got a right to not wear a mask. Well, if you do that, if that's your right and that's what you're going to do, then be by yourself. You've got a right to be by yourself. Because if this pandemic continues to spread and mutate and go into other variants, we're not going to get rid of this thing. Because whereas we're on a Delta variant now, an Epsilon variant is possible. And so leadership says, hey, stop that. That's selfish thinking because no person is an island. We're all connected. So if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your children. Do it for your mother. Do it for your cousin. Do it for your friend. So we can get past this and get back to what we're used to. Thus, getting our businesses back in order.
My next topic was health. So we're probably going to be dealing with this for a while. How can the city help better? How can the mayor's office do more to try and get things on the right track?
So the key to any situation is communication. I'm a veteran. Whenever a ship, and I'm a sailor, so whenever the ship is in stress, we go into what's called general quarters. and communication lines are set up so that we can then battle whatever it is that we're dealing with. If it's an enemy, if it's a mechanical failure, a fire, you go into general quarters and you immediately begin to communicate so that everybody knows what everybody else is doing and we're all on the same page. So we've got a task force here, but that task force should be meeting constantly, and they should be communicating to the citizenry constantly so that everybody understands the latest science and the latest formulations of a plan. So we've got a city rep from the mayor's office as well as from the council, a county rep, a state rep from the House as well as the Senate, and of course, the county health director, because everyone should be following that lead. That's the lead scientist in our county. They have a direct line to the State Department of Health, which then has a direct line to the Federal Department of Health. These things are not complicated to me, but you must be resolute in your leadership, because if you're not, then people will begin to fray, and it'll appear as if there's no one steering the ship. And if no one's steering the ship, we're out of control.
Do you think that's where we are right now?
I don't think we're out of control. I just think that there is not resolute leadership, and there's not constant leadership. And unfortunately, when we began this venture, there was not galvanized leadership. We had some leaders who felt this way and others who felt that way, as opposed to following the science, which is the county health director. That's the leader. And all of the rest of us should be supporting that, because that's the science. I mean, listen, I'm a doctor, but I'm a doctor of law. That's different than being a medical doctor. So we've got to understand and know our roles and respect those who have the knowledge. That wasn't happening when this pandemic broke out in March of 2020. It was not happening. And it took a while for it to happen, not just within our city, but within our state as well. It was just a couple of weeks ago when our governor finally said, it's common sense. I don't understand what's the matter with them. Get a vaccine. But that's, a year and 4 months. And to be fair, the vaccine has only been out since the beginning of the year. So let's say it's been 7 months. That should have been the message from the beginning. Get the vaccine. Because now we all see that the new pandemic is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
How has COVID-19 affected your life, your family?
Well, I'm a COVID survivor. So I contracted the virus at the end of January. There was no vaccine yet. Thank goodness the vaccine became available right after I got well. And so, when I talk to people about this, I express to them the fact that certainly it was physically challenging, but it was the mental challenge that was the greatest of all, because I had to quarantine away from my family. I'm a family guy. I love my wife. I love my kids. I love our dogs. That's my reason for being. And I had to get away from all of them for 14 days. And I've never been away from my wife that long before. And so mentally, it was very, very challenging. From a physical perspective, it's very difficult when you wake up and 15 minutes later you want to go back to sleep. That was a very, for lack of a better term, rude awakening. And also when you can't take deep breaths, because the virus makes your chest very tight. And so you can't take deep breaths. You have to take very short, shallow breaths. And so those things work on your mind. You're away from your family, you're all alone, you're by yourself, you can't breathe very well, you're tired and lethargic all of the time. So it's very mentally taxing. So personally, that's the way it has affected me. From a business perspective, because I am a lawyer and a judge, it was not very challenging because by the way, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I'm a civil plaintiff's lawyer. So most of my work is done through negotiations and trying cases in the courtroom. Well, the courthouse was shut down, so nobody was trying cases. But I was still able to communicate with those who were adverse to my clients. And I have an outstanding paralegal who works with me, who is really able to aid me in that process. And she had already gone through COVID-19 and had to actually be hospitalized for a short period of time. So I was able to carry on while she was out. She was able to carry on while I was out. And once again, there's that team concept and communications. And so, from a business perspective, it did not necessarily affect me adversely. From a mental perspective, for those 14 days, it was very, very taxing. And by the way, the end of my COVID period was Valentine's Day. So I didn't know if I was going to be able to spend Valentine's Day with my wife. But thank goodness the results came through right in the nick of time, and we reunited on Valentine's Day.
That's great.
It was.
So my last kind of particular question that I'm asking everybody, so when somebody is sitting down, they're in their voting booth, absentee voting, whatever, wherever they are, they're looking at their ballot, they're seeing these 5 names for mayor. Why do you want them to choose you?
Well, I would hope that they would have done their research prior to sitting down. Because let me say this, it is important that every citizen researches every candidate that is running and to see if that candidate is the individual who's going to best serve the needs of the city. Of course, we all come from a particular perspective, but what's important is that we know our city and we know each of those candidates and how they stand on issues. That's why it's so important what you're doing today. That's why it's so important that we have forums and that all of the candidates show up at the forums. Because see, it's very controlled right here, right now, where I can answer your questions and I can formulate them in the fashion that I want to. But when you're standing on stage with 5 other people and you've got to answer that question right there on your feet, and it could be challenged by the answer of another person, now you really get a sense of how a person reacts and acts on their feet and their ability to communicate effectively in the moment. That's very important. So I would ask all of our citizens to research all of the to research all of the candidates and to view the forums so that you can see how a candidate acts in real time and how they react in real time. Because a canned interview is one thing. There's no pressure with me here right now. It's just you and I. But if there were 4 other candidates standing here beside me, then that changes the dynamic of that situation. And oftentimes, when we're negotiating on behalf of the city, when we're making decisions on behalf of the city, that's the environment. It's not one-on-one question answer or putting together a written response or reply. It's what are you doing right now? What's your answer? What's your leadership position? So that's why it's important that we do our research. I don't ask anyone to vote for me because I'm good looking or because I'm gregarious and have a wonderful personality. Do your research. Find out what I've done. You can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. So find out where I've been. Find out what I've done. Find out what I stand for. And if that correlates with your beliefs and where you think our city should be going, then you should shade that circle for Karlos Finley for mayor.
So thinking about it, if they're like, okay, I've done my research, what are some things like you could say quickly, like they can remember that? They're sitting down, they're like, okay, he wanted to do this and this and this, and this is how he's going to help my life.
Change with vision for the future. He's the guy who's talking about growing the tourism industry here in the city of Mobile. He's the guy who's been doing it for 16 years. He's the person who understands crime and violent crime because he's a former prosecutor, he's a judge, he's a Coast Guard veteran. He's the guy who understands what it's like to be a working class person because he was in a paper mill for 10 years while he went to law school, while he went to undergrad. He's worked and gone to school. He knows my struggle. He understands from whence I come. He knows what I'm facing every day as a single parent because he's been on the board of directors for Boys and Girls Clubs. He knows what our children need. He understands the importance of conflict resolution being taught early on in life so that when an individual grows, it's not a violent outcome that they're looking for. They're thinking. Those are the kinds of things that people need to know about me that are going to make them make that decision in the final moment. And again, we've been canvassing this community for a month and a half now. And it is really extraordinary to go into a neighborhood and you see very few or none of your yard signs, and then you leave that evening and there's 50 of them out there in different houses, and you've interacted with people and you've found out what it is that's important to them. That's leadership, and that's what leaders should do, interact with the people.
Is there any other topic, priority that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask about?
Well, I could go in a little deeper on how we get out of this series of violent crime, because we talked about the youth and, of course, creating situations so that we can serve our young folk with Head Start and teaching conflict resolution. But what about the people who are actually doing the crimes now, the 19, 20, 25-year-olds? We talked about things for them to do, but the relationship with law enforcement is the key. So I've got an initiative where I want to encourage police officers to live in the communities in which they serve. Not be a visitor, but to actually live there. Now they get to know the people, they get to know the residents. Most importantly, the residents get to know them. Their children are playing with the children of the residents. The residents see them on occasions when it's not something bad, like when they're cutting their grass or washing their car, going to the grocery store. They're now a part of that community, as opposed to someone who's coming in to control a situation. One of the things that I'm looking at is government housing. So as a veteran, when you get out of boot camp, the government tells you where to live. And oftentimes, those places are not on the base. They're out in that community where that base is, so that a relationship is formed. Because military, they want to form relationships with the communities in which they serve. Well, the same thing could apply for our police officers. When they graduate from the academy, we've got housing already for them in the areas in which they serve. Now, they don't have to worry about a rent payment. They don't have to worry about water, electricity, gas, whatever the case may be. Utilities are done, house is done. They don't get paid as much money as they would if they had to go look for those things, but they don't have to deal with that now. And we've got a lot of blighted properties in our city. Let's refurbish some of those houses. Let's create housing for our police officers. That's an incentive to stay here also. It then raises property values in that community. And other people will feel encouraged to invest in those communities because they're safe now, there are nicer houses there. That's what grows a community and a society. So that initiative, I feel, is very, very important and cuts me away from the remaining candidates because no one else has talked about that. And that's crucial. It is crucial that we have police officers living in the communities in which they serve.
I think that is something that's really I've seen lacking is the relationship between the community and law enforcement that are assigned to our area essentially. Because when I'm thinking about it, just from a personal standpoint, I don't know what officer is assigned to watch over the area I live in. And I wanted to know. Before I've seen in other places I've worked where we had a person who came to our apartment complex and said, hi, I'm going to be responding to your area. This is who I am. There was that initiative. Could we also do things like that where they go and they talk to people to create that relationship?
By all means. So I told you I'm a downtown dweller. The strength of our neighborhood is our neighborhood association. So we have a formed neighborhood association that reaches out to law enforcement. In 1 month out of every year, there is an officer who comes to visit our monthly meeting. And so we encountered 2 weeks ago this dynamic group out of Overland Heights here in Mobile. They formed an HOA, and they've been really getting things done in their community. And I want to utilize them to expose them to other communities so they understand the power of that HOA and how it works. Because see, when you've got an association, you can assign one person to go to city council meetings. You can assign another person to go to county commission meetings, planning meetings, water board, because you've got masses. And then every month, those individuals come back and they do a report to the community. Now everybody knows what's going on. Also, city council is on YouTube now, so you don't have to physically go down there. I would encourage everyone to do it though, so they understand, how that whole situation works, at least once. But that's how communications flow and make a better city. So yes, you're 100% correct. You should know who the officer is, or at least the precinct captain is in that community, so that you can access them. The police work for the people. There should not be a number or an individual that cannot be contacted. They should have access to whatever officer it is in your community. And so we'll foster those kinds of things, but we also want to make sure that they're not very far away, like they live down the street.
Right. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? Any other things that, we may not have talked about, or that you just wanted to say to wrap it up?
Well, of course, I can go on and talk for hours about this because there's so many needs within our city. I mean, we didn't touch on the bridge, we didn't touch on the potholes in the streets that are tearing everyone's cars up, how our public works department is understaffed and overworked, all of those kinds of things, trash pickup, garbage, all of those are areas that need to be worked on. I mean, if you look right outside of my headquarters here, you'll see road work that's been going on for over a year. I don't know why that's the case. I mean, we've started on an entirely new section of the street, but we haven't finished the old section of the street. And so we've been here now for 5 months, and the environment outside of our doors has not changed. There's been no progress made outside of our front door. That's an issue. Now, I know that those are contracted employees out there. Those are not City of Mobile workers. That's a job that has been contracted to a private entity. Well, if we utilize the funds that we have in our coffers that we talked about earlier, and we hire more people in public works, we've got enough work that we can keep those people busy patching up our streets, doing those kinds of things all year long, because we've got terracotta pipes oftentimes in our water system. And so those break. And so there's always work that can be done. We need to hire folks to do that. There was a gentleman outside of my headquarters today, because I chose to have a headquarters right in the middle of the city. I didn't want some place that was, in a highfalutin area or someplace that was off the beaten track. I wanted to be smack dab in the middle because there are people who walk this area. A gentleman came up to me today. He said, Mr. Finley, I got a job. I got a job. And I've got an apartment now. And that's because you looked me in the eye and told me that I need to tighten myself up. That made my day. That's leadership. I mean, I almost started crying because this is a grown man. And now he's got a place to live. He showed me his key. He's got a card key for access. He's got a job working, and he's doing well. We can't candy coat stuff and we can't baby people. We've got to give them the respect to say, hey, look, you got to straighten up. Not for yourself, for your family and for your community, because we all need each other in this community. That's what's going to ultimately make the difference, is that we realize we're all connected. We are strongest together in Mobile.
Great, thank you very much. I think that's it, unless you got anything else.
That's it.